On this edition of In the Gun, we've got a schedule. The Mountaineers 2025 slate has been released. We'll discuss the good, the bad, the things we notice, all of that and more on this edition of ITG.
You are now watching Believe.
ITG.
With Wes, Owen, and Jed.
I've got the best teammates in the business.
No way!
They both played the game. They both know the game. Owen is the runaway beer truck known for having some fun.
Owen Schmidt, you have a podcast In the Gun.
Owen Schmidt, like a runaway beer truck down the sidelines.
Jed is the signal caller who is the X's and O's and the brainiac.
Statistically, always punting on fourth down makes no sense.
So we've combined those two skill sets.
Skills I've acquired over a very long career.
You are In the Gun.
Once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
In the Gun, episode 229 of your new favorite WVU football podcast. I'm Wes Schuler, and I've got the best teammates in the business as always. We've got the beer truck, Big Owen Schmidt. We've got the signal caller, Jed Drenning. And as always, we are brought to you. We are brought to you in part by our friends at Bet Online. The biggest betting weekend of the year is here. That means more updated odds and props for Super Sunday. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. Hundreds of prop bets, MVP odds, exclusive in-game live betting. Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. So whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online offers you everything and more to enhance your game day experience. Bet Online, the game starts here. And gentlemen, we have a schedule that is the crux of this episode. We have WVU's 2025-26 schedule, but before we get to that, briefly, some headlines as always to kick around to get us started here. And we begin with a friend of the show, a friend of Big O. I mean, everybody's a friend of Big O, all right? That's a pretty easy qualifier. But of course, we're talking about none other than Charles Wesley Godwin, one of our original guests on the podcast when we did our kind of off-season series of guests, our A-listers last year. Charles Wesley Godwin, of course, a just on-fire country music artist from Morgantown, West Virginia. And he announced on his Twitter account that he is going to be releasing a new song, a new single this Friday, February 7th, all building up to the release of his newest album, his newest EP, Lonely Mountain Town, which comes out on Friday, February 28th, my birthday. So a big shout out and a big thank you to Charles Wesley Godwin for the birthday present. I appreciate it. But it's going to be a 7-track EP coming from Charles at the end of the month. And Big O, I know, listen, we love shouting out Charles and giving him some love when we can. You want to talk about a rising star. I mean, over the past 2 years, he has just exploded, and going to be pretty cool to see what he does with this newest project.
Yeah. It's the Little Things is the single, correct?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just a testament to hard work and having faith, man. Believing in yourself, putting the work in, putting the time in, knowing what he wants. And living a good life, living an honest life, and you see the reward that he's getting. Obviously, that this is way more than just 2 years in the making.
Sure.
There's been obviously tons of years singing, learning perfecting the craft of singer songwriter, and being able to perform on stage. There's a lot that goes into it. Take it from somebody who, obviously was able to have some fun and get thrown into that world a little bit. A lot goes into it, and it's more than just sitting down and playing a guitar. Believe it or not, there's a lot of difference between sitting down and playing and standing up and playing. That's just playing the instrument, right?
It's like the difference between running the football in practice and running the football on Saturday night with 70,000 people in the stands, right? Yeah. It's a completely different world.
Yeah. And you got to get used to it. And, you can just see, especially when people start getting you start getting recognition, but you start gaining confidence in yourself, and you see this the songwriting capability of Charles. I mean, he just writes great,
Beautiful.
almost motion pictures. I mean, you can see the song when you listen to him. He's a great writer, man, and you know, honestly, so proud of him. I mean, Jed West. I mean, what you guys have gotten to listen to some of his stuff. I mean, it's just awesome to see the success.
Well, you just hit the key point to me. I know when we had him on the show, we had an opportunity to pick his brain about a great many things, right? But the part, and maybe it's because I'm a writer, that's my background, that's what I do, to listen to his process in which he creates things that I can't even begin to imagine creating. The artistic side of him as a writer, forget the voice, forget the performer half of it, just the writer half of it couldn't impress me more. I am so impressed by his skill to pen lyrics, tell a story. Just as you said, Owen, there's a visual element to it, even when there's only words attached, when you're listening to what he has to say. And it was just great when we had him on the show to hear him walk us through how he goes about his business in that part of it. But he's obviously the full package. I mean, he's a Renaissance man. He's an incredibly talented writer. As a vocalist, boy, I don't know if anybody out there is as hot as him right now. And then there's the whole different part that you just hit on, Owen. There's the performer part. I mean, he's a natural performer, and to labor through the cloud of uncertainty that so many of these guys look. Owen, nobody knows better than you. You were right there when he was doing this. For every one Charles Wesley Godwin that makes it, there's 10,000 that don't, that plow through
Oh
that.
yeah,
We're all friends with some of these people, many of these people, right? That
yeah.
they do the same thing. They hustle through the gigs. Every time there's an open mic, they take the opportunity. It just doesn't go anywhere. Their passion only carries them so far. But with Charles, he just kept his nose down to the grindstone, kept enhancing his art, his craft, and it's all paying off for him. And the beneficiary, well, the rest of us are the beneficiary to that, right? But I couldn't be happier for him. Great story, great guy. For all is about all the right things, and this is just one more great step for him.
Yeah, no doubt.
Absolutely.
Well said by both of you guys. I remember it's episode it's ITG 143 if you want to go back and listen to our 70, 80-minute conversation with Charles about his WVU fandom, his music, and everything in between. I remember he told us a story about how, I believe he said it was a Toyota Highlander that he had. I spent a lot of nights in my Toyota Highlander driving all across the East Coast and the Mid-Atlantic and playing, different breweries and bars and little cafes and things like that, with 100 people listening. And from that to legitimately one of the hottest artists in all of music right now. It's amazing to see the spread of his brand and his music from what we kind of saw from the WVU side to now the national side of a guy who is getting all the recognition in all the kind of big places. A huge shout out to Charles. We are hoping to do some stuff with him on ITG in the future, and we will obviously all be dancing and singing along to the new album that comes out at the end of the month. New song. It's The Little Things comes out this Friday, February 7th. Make sure you are checking that out wherever you stream your music. Gentlemen, also this week, when this episode drops, Wednesday, February 5th, Jed, I know we don't put as much stock into this as we used to in the precedented times, or maybe the version of college football 1.0, the first 150 years or so of the sport compared to where we are now. But Wednesday, February 5th is National Signing Day, and with that, there will be some additional additions to this first Rich Rodriguez, well, I guess kind of end of the Neil Brown first Rich Rodriguez signing class.
It's once again we discuss all the time roster management. Now more so than any era in the history of college football, that's right at the forefront and just as critical as anything you do. So any opportunity when the door is open to enhance your roster by populating your roster with more talent, you're going to capitalize on that. And I would fully expect this episode is going to drop on National Signing Day, right? I would expect at least a handful, maybe even a couple more than a handful a mix of transfers, high school kids. But yeah, I mean, right now they're still trying to piece together what this roster looks like. They went through this first round of speed dating with the last portion of that portal window coming out of December. Coach Rod was hired, a little late into that. So they're still trying to figure out what it is they have. And they're not truly going to know that probably until some point in the summer. You'll learn more as you get through off-season conditioning. You'll learn a whole lot more through tour duty. Then you got spring ball. I like the fact, and I think this is somewhat by design, that spring ball is going to end earlier than normal. I mean, we have a spring game pegged. I don't think we mentioned it on here yet, did we? April 5th. So.
Yeah.
That's the earliest spring game that I can ever recall. Now, the beauty of that means spring ball is going to be wrapped up about 10 days or so before that April portal window. So you can kind of line your shots up and take them accordingly when that window opens. But yeah, this is going to be an ongoing process. It started in December with the speed dating round and, the nearly 30 players that we brought in. It's going to continue today on signing day. It's going to continue in April. You'll see it continue even into May and June. Bear in mind, we've said this many times on this program. When Rich last year was at Jack State, they brought in 60 new players in one off season and 40 new players in the summer. So, yes, this is an ongoing process at just about every position. Kids are going to come, kids are going to go until you settle on what your roster is going to look like at some point in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's confusing, it's fast and quick and fluid and ever-changing, but it is the reality of the current landscape, and you got to get with it or get lost. And I think what you just touched on, Jed, is the encouraging part to me. Listen, when you're taking over as a new coaching staff, it's always a bit of a rush, right? You're trying to implement your culture. You're trying to get your right guys. You're trying to do all of that and get ready for spring ball, all these different things. In some ways, it's easier than ever before because you can bring a lot of new guys in, some who maybe have some experience with you and your coaching staff already. In some ways, it's harder than ever before because it's harder to retain the guys that you would like to keep as part of the previous regime. But with all of that, Rich Rodriguez has just gone through this recently and on a pretty large scale, as you just laid out. So that, I think, is good. That he's just gone through this and is very familiar with this. It's not like he was just at some school for 8 or 9 years and had his culture established and all those things before the transfer portal and the NIL. I think that extreme turnover that he went through last year at Jack State should help him kind of steady the ship and navigate this process easier, I think.
Oh, and there's 2 R's. If you can master one of the 2 R's in this new era, either the retention piece or the replacement piece, or to some degree, a little bit of each. If you can retain the key pieces that you feel are most critical to what you're doing, all the better. But the truth is, you're going to lose some pieces that you don't want to lose. So what that means is you have to have a plan in place to replace the pieces that you lose. Now, right now, we're still building. We're working towards that. But Wes, you talked about it. There's a good and there's a bad. Look at the basketball team where it was last year after we're switching coaches before Darian DeVries was hired. What did that roster look like? You talk about gutted. Now, if Darian DeVries took this job over 10 years ago, there's no way he could have done in one short off season, what he's done so far. No way. That's the upside. Now, the downside is that's where those 2 R's come in, Owen. You have to either master one or the other, or at least some of each, the retention piece, the replacement piece. So we're going to see how this goes in Rich's first off season, right?
Yeah, and I think you're going to see, obviously, a sprinkle of both until his culture really gets embedded and everybody buys in, which, I mean, it's kind of a buy-in now or get out, and they see the benefits, right? I think that's one thing about Rich's program that you're going to see. We're talking about retention and replace. Maybe it might be less replacing and more retention because of the culture he'll build, because of that tenacious off-season conditioning and that no-quit attitude where these guys are going to understand, like, hey, look, this is a winning program. This is what it means to be a part of a winning culture, a winning attitude. Another funny thing, we talked about Sean Mariner, Big Daddy, shared a piece with us about locker room cleanliness. there's little things that they're starting to learn and understand. All the little things matter, right? All the little things matter. And that's the attention to detail that Coach Rod is ever so kind to remind us of, and reminds us with wealthy portions of conditioning and training that we are given in the off season. So it's going to be interesting to see. Like I said, who knows? There might be a bunch of guys that say, "This ain't for me." That could happen. That could happen after spring ball. You know what I mean? There could be another mass exodus. That could happen. As the years go on, I don't want to look ahead of myself and say, "Hey, we're going to be ultra successful." I just know from my experience. But as the years go on, and he builds that rapport with those players, and they start understanding like the winning attitude, I think you're going to see more retention than replace. It's all a hard process. And then the money aspect comes into it. You know what I mean? How much are we going to be able to spend to keep some of these players? How much is he going to be willing to really spend on guys to keep them there? I'm not saying that, this is a new process fully for him. But at some point, the bags are going to get a little uneven, you know? And I think that's really where it's going to come into as far as the retention piece comes, how much they're willing to spend on keeping the good and letting those other guys kind of know where they're at. And if they want to go try it, they can do it. Being honest, I think the biggest thing. Anyways, I love seeing just the little nuggets of gold that we've been getting from guys who are in the building and listening and learning about the fantastic baptisms that are happening to these new players, and not only new players but coaches as well, who have not coached under Coach Rodriguez but might know him as an acquaintance or a guy through a guy, or even have worked with him but haven't seen the full relentlessness that this man has right now, because there is a giant weight and chip on his shoulder right now to obviously improve next year and go, make this 12-team playoff, win a Big 12 championship, and ultimately a natty. So we will see. To be continued.
We got that text from Big Daddy the other day. I think you were in the same place I was. There was probably 2.4 seconds where I kind of shivered. And I felt like it was 1993, and I was on the beautiful campus of Glenville State again. I was like, whoa. I forgot what it was like. And that was like a quick flashback to like, oh no, you don't want to be on the business end of some of those things that happen with Rich.
Yeah.
Now, to your point, and Wes, I'll toss it back to you with this. I think you make a great point. The culture can obviously impact the retention piece, but I think in a roundabout way, maybe not as obviously, but the culture might also impact the replacement piece. In other words, if you have the right culture in place, you might be more inclined or more likely, if you recruit appropriately, to have an untested freshman or sophomore that once you lose somebody to the open market, maybe the replacement part takes place internally instead of externally because of the culture.
Yeah.
Maybe the guy ready to replace the starter that you lost is already on your roster and just hasn't really been tested to that extent yet because of the culture. He's ready. So yeah, the culture piece, Wes, can hit both those R's to some extent. It can help you retain, like Owen was talking about, but I also think it gives you a fighter's chance to, when you do have to replace, at least have a shot to do it within the confines of your existing roster.
Yeah, no, that's a great point by you. And I just think, listen, there's no right way to do this. If there was, everybody would do it the same way. You can do it the Dabo Swinney way and still win the ACC and go to the playoff. You can do it like Notre Dame and Oregon have done and replace a high-level quarterback and still have a lot of success and continue. It's like a defensive formation. If there was a perfect defensive formation, everybody would run it. If there was a perfect way to navigate all this, everybody would do it the same way. Whatever works is whatever works. And I think I think you both there are on to something that might be kind of Rich Rodriguez's own unique way of navigating all of this. Another thank you to our friends at Toothman Ford, and a big shout out to JR and everybody there at Team Toothman. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. Finally, gentlemen, as we wrap this up, we have been a little long-winded in our headlines here, but it's all right. It's fun having the three of us back together. Ohio State, yes, reigning national champions Ohio State. Not only did they lose their defensive coordinator to Penn State, they also lost their offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly. And so they now have obviously some vacant coordinator positions to fill there in Columbus. On the offensive side of the football, a lot of it's Ohio State, as you can imagine, a lot of big names being mentioned and rumored and interviewed for the process. Brian Hartline, right in the thick of that, of course. Young co-OC with Chip Kelly last year, of course, had a ton of success as a player for Ohio State and has been an ace recruiter for them over the last few years as the wide receiver coach and co-OC. Joe Moorhead, a familiar big name, is apparently in the mix, as is Neil Brown, former WVU football head coach. And so, Jed, I toss it to you on this one. Just kind of your initial reaction when the news broke in the last couple of days that Neil Brown was on the short list, was one of the guys that's being considered for the Ohio State offensive coordinator position.
Let's start with this. Neil Brown and Ryan Day have been two ships passing in the night for a long time. Back when Neil was a receiver at UMass, Ryan Day was with Chip Kelly at New Hampshire. I mean, they were playing each other. Matter of fact, I believe they may have had a cup of coffee on the same staff, where I think maybe Neil was leaving and Ryan was coming, one or the other, very early in both their careers. I think one of them might have replaced the other on the way out, or there was some connection even back then to that. So there's a history there. They both have spread pedigrees. Obviously, Ryan Day coming from the Chip Kelly school and Neil coming from the Air Raid school. So there is that history there. That matters. But also, at his best, one of the things that Nick Saban did when he was at Bama, in his ongoing quest to stay ahead of the curve when he was winning all those championships, and every time the NCAA would change a rule to try and slow him down, he'd circumvent the rule and find a clever way around it. Well, he ended up hiring these coaches looking to rebuild their brand equity, from Steve Sarkisian. I mean, there was a long list of these guys that he would bring in internally, even then as just analysts. Hey, can you do some scouting for me? I want your mind in the building. Never underestimate the value that a head coach places in the experience of another head coach, because each path is unique. Each head coach has seen things that other head coaches have not. It's nice to be able to sit in a staff room and bounce things off and ask the opinion of another guy who has walked in your shoes, at least in terms of holding the same title, especially at a power conference level. So I would start with all that. But also, if you think back now, it's been a while, because Neil's been a head coach for the better part of his career now, for a decade, right? But before he was a head coach, obviously, he made his name as an up-and-coming coordinator, high-flying coordinator at Troy, then high-flying coordinator at Texas Tech. He was shredding people in Lubbock. He has a good history as an offensive coordinator. But I also, if I'm Ryan Day, I'm looking at this as, look, I'm trying to survive and advance. I'm coming off my first championship now. I can afford to be a little more bold. So that might play into it as well. Say what you want about his record against Michigan. That title is going to put a little swagger in you, right? So he's going to make whatever choice or decision he feels is best for his program. And if he thinks it's a guy like Neil Brown, because he had a great track record as an offensive play caller, it's a guy that he can bounce ideas off of. They kind of view things in a like-minded way to some extent offensively, but he probably also appreciates the fact that Neil's a guy that, as a head coach, became more of a global play caller and understood the value of helping his defense, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, Ryan Day had to replace his defensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. So he might be looking to find a way that an offense that can help your defense. And let's face it, whatever your track record as a play caller might have been, it's going to look a lot better when you got the bells and whistles and toys executing the plays that you call at a place like Ohio State. You are immediately going to look better than you ever have because of those toys. Because those toys, those Jimmies and Joes.
You got 3 or 4 first-round picks in your wide receiver room alone.
Yes, it's not often that coaches are afforded the opportunity outside of a handful of places to have their side of the ball or both sides of the ball. Their Jimmies are typically a lot better than the Joes they're facing. And that's never been the case for most coaches. That's never been the case for Neil Brown. Again, I can understand Ryan Day entertaining this possibility, but also there's other names in the mix, as you and I talked about, Wes. Joe Moorhead. Yeah, big name. Again, I can make a similar argument for Joe Moorhead. being in that discussion as the Ohio State offensive coordinator and play caller. And they might go internally. You mentioned this to me, Heartline, if they want to retain the recruits, because that's what Heartline's made his name as. So he has options there, but he'd almost be remiss if he's going to look at a guy with so many years of head coaching experience and so many years as an exceptional offensive play caller and not at least see what he has to say and see what he might bring to the table and sit through a few interviews and bounce some things off of him, see how it goes along with all the others. Why wouldn't he? And that's the way I see it.
No doubt. Why wouldn't you cast a wide net? And when you're Ohio State, you can cast a wide net because a lot of people are going to be interested, rightfully so. So it makes a lot of sense. And that will obviously be one of those storylines that we continue to keep an eye on as we roll along here in the coming weeks. But it's time for us to get to a break now, because when we return on the other side, we've got a schedule. The 2025 slate for the Mountaineers has been released. 12 games. 6 at home, 6 on the road, Big 12 schedule, out-of-conference schedule, all that good stuff. We'll break it all down, give some thoughts here when we return. You are in the gun.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
ITG will be right back.
They're just going to let the clock wind down as the Mountaineers of West Virginia will be the 2006 Nokia Sugar Bowl champion. There could be some furniture getting burnt up in Morgantown tonight. Final score, West Virginia 38, Georgia 35.
You are in the gun.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
There are better-known tractors in the world than Coyote. Ones with bigger names, longer histories, more popular hats, cute toy lines. But there's not a single tractor ever been built that's better equipped to do the dirty work. So we'll just focus on what really matters. Coyote, we dig dirt.
Get 0% financing for up to 84 months with approved credit on select Coyote tractors in stock now at Johnston Equipment. Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan.
What is that? What the?
Back in the gun here as we roll along, and we've got a schedule, 2025 slate, the first year of Rich Rodriguez's second era as the head ball coach in Morgantown. Will begin on August 30th. We're going to go through the schedule here, each and every game. Like I mentioned, 6 home games, 6 away games this year. It's not the 7-5 split like it was last year. Back to 6-6 this year. But Jed, before we get into the specifics, the facts here of this schedule, some overarching, just kind of Big 12 schedule release thoughts from you.
First of all, it drives me crazy that they wait so long to do it. I mean, do you remember the days back in the Big East getting our schedule in October, or maybe even some days in the Big 12?
Well, you know
earlier,
what, Jed?
right?
Real quick, before you complain, count your blessings, because you could be on the NFL side of things and have to wait until freaking May for some reason. Even though you know all your home games and all your away games already, we're going to wait until May because we got to drag everything out in the NFL. Not to be critical.
That's true. So with the Big 12, what your mark has done, we've been working off this 4-year cycle in terms of knowing who you're going to play and where you're going to play them. You just don't know when. Over the course of 4 years, they started that matrix, they call it, a couple years ago. And I think there's only 3 games that we play every year. But most teams are much like West Virginia. There are some teams that will completely vanish from their schedule for a year or two and then show back up on it. So a couple things that intrigue me about this Big 12 schedule at large on the macro, and then we'll go micro with West Virginia. There were 3 teams in the Big 12 that play the weekend of August 23rd. Now, 2 of them play one another. Yeah, week 0. Iowa State, K-State play in Dublin to kick off the Big 12 season, August 23rd.
Farmageddon in Dublin.
Yes, Farmageddon.
Oh, big Owen, bring your
potatoes, baby.
Big Owen, bring your potatoes, baby. The Cyclones and the Wildcats are coming to town.
It's a potato Farmageddon. Meanwhile, Fresno is at Kansas and Lawrence, also August 23rd. What's interesting about those week 0 games, all 3 of those teams were granted by the Big 12, not 2 byes, but 3 byes. I found that interesting. Now, if you want to dive into some of what you're looking at with West Virginia, first of all, we've known the opponents since this 4-year matrix came out. We just don't know the when. We know the where and the who, but not the when. So if you want to break it down like this, one of the first things I did this when the season ended. So of the 9 teams we play in the Big 12, their combined winning percentage last year was .579. Those are the 9 teams we do play. Now, when you look at the 6 teams we don't play, their combined winning percentage was .526. See where I'm going with that? So, but once again, I warn you, I caution those listening, you should know by now, with the turnover of rosters, unlike it's ever been, don't read too awful much. You hear that Arizona State picked 16th and you win the league? You hear that West Virginia picked 14th 2 years ago and we won 9 games?
Oklahoma picked at the 2nd in the league, 3rd in the league last year, and they win 0 league games. Goose egg.
Yeah, so don't read too much into what happened the previous season because the roster turnover is incredible. So, yeah, the winning percentage, .579 for West Virginia's 9 opponents last year. There were 3 teams that won 11 games in the Big 12. We played 2 of them on this year's schedule. Wes, August 30th, Owen, the Robert Morris Colonials come to Morgantown. Now, a couple quick things there. They were 7-5 a year ago, pretty good football team at the FCS level. They struggled on the road. They were 1-4 on the road. I believe this is their first game against a power conference school. When you look at their history, they played a host of G5s. They lost to Utah State, Air Force, Miami, Ohio, a couple other MACs. I can't find a game in which they played a power conference school. So this might be their debut against a power conference school in that August 30th trip to Morgantown. A week later, this is an intriguing one. We've talked about this from when Shane Lyons was here. Shane Lyons struck a deal with Ohio University, the Bobcats. People are asking, why are we going to Athens, Ohio for a road game? It's not uncommon. Oklahoma State's done this for a long time. Other teams have done this for a long time.
Iowa State just played there 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. So some teams have done this. Instead of paying a group of 5 team to come to your place, what you do is say, hey, we're not going to pay. Instead, we're going to do this. We're going to work it out, the finances differently. How about a 2-for-1? We'll come to your place once, and you return the favor and come to our place twice. So 2 times, 6, 7, 8 years down the road, whatever it is, if we end up playing both those games, we'll see. But Ohio U is scheduled to come to Morgantown twice on down the road. Now, the interesting thing there, I might have been the only geek that was paying attention to the fact that in the West Virginia fan base, their head coach last year, Tim Albin, his name was gaining some traction in this hiring cycle for a lot of jobs. He ended up leaving to go to Charlotte. They had a heck of a football team, guys. He led them to their first MAC title since 1968. They were a very good football team last year. Now, what's happened? They took their offensive coordinator, Brian Smith. They promoted him, so it was an internal hire or promotion. The new head coach, Brian Smith, he's the guy who faced Rich's old school, Jack State, in the bowl game as an interim. They removed the interim tag. Now he's the head coach. Intriguing here that you're looking at a trip to Peden Stadium in Athens, Ohio. Now, Peden Stadium only holds 24,000. So for those who did make the trip to Frisco, Texas, for the Frisco Bowl. It's similar to what we played in there. Toyota Stadium, 20,500. This is slightly bigger, but not much. And what's intriguing here, you mentioned it, Wes, in recent years, in Athens, the Bobcats have claimed a couple Big 12 hides. 2 years ago, they caught Iowa State sleeping a little bit early in the season, knocked off the Cyclones 10-7, a home game in Athens at Peden Stadium. And then if you go back to 17, they knocked off Kansas back when everybody was beating Kansas. So that's two Big 12 wins in the last 8 years. So I would say be on alert, right? It's a dangerous place to play, but it's a team in turnover. Their head coach is gone. They're looking for a new head coach. They lost a lot of key pieces. And the difference between us and Iowa State, I would think, not many people are probably inclined to make the trip from Ames, Iowa to Athens. But meanwhile, Parkersburg's 45 minutes from Athens.
It's not
Charleston's
far.
an hour and a half from Athens. I see Mountaineer fans as viewing this as having a novelty element to it and saying, hey, that's kind of cool. We get to go take over a stadium with 24,000 people.
And Jed, for the Mountaineer fans that like to have a good time, let me just tell you from personal experience, Athens, Ohio, one of the best college towns in America, baby.
Great Halloween town, too.
It's a beautiful, gorgeous, tiny little Ohio true college town. You can park and walk for the next 2 days everywhere you want to go. It's awesome.
We went through there going and coming to Cincinnati because I didn't travel with the team to Cincinnati. It was close enough. I just drove so I could take my family. And we passed through Athens. I got some friends in Athens actually. Mark Loudon, who used to work at WDTV in Clarksburg, and then he was at Glenville with us as the PR director. But, and this is kind of unique. G5 school, not a home game. You're on the road in their place. Think back to when you guys went to Huntington, right? I mean, in 2007, you remember that trip down to Huntington? You were on the road at a G5 school, so you've been through this. So what do you think here?
Well, I mean, Marshall was rocking that day. It was a sold-out crowd. Me coming from a small school made me really appreciate not so much the size, but filling it out, right? Filling it out, packing it out. There's nothing worse to me honestly, and this is just how I always felt, how good are you really if you don't pack the stadium out? And it always makes the game to me feel bigger, regardless of the size it holds. Yep. If it's packed, the game the atmosphere is just there. For me, it's just there. I love it. I love everything about it. It could be a high school football game. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't care if the bleachers are small, but if they're packed out, there's something
nowhere to park,
boys.
nowhere to park in the parking lot, right? Yeah. And you're like, oh man, this is gonna be juiced.
Boys, it's a packed house tonight. You know what I mean? There ain't a seat in the house. It don't matter. You know what I'm saying? So that just really brings the atmosphere. And in my opinion, as a player, just juices you up. It just juices you up. I hated playing bowl games. And we were fortunate to play in some huge bowl games, but when the stadium's not packed out, it just like that luster of, playing in this prestigious game. But hey, it's going to be a great game because, as Wes pointed out, it is a great little college town. And those guys are going to be pumped up. They're going to want to, they want to kick our ass. We're the big boys coming in town. So it's going to be a fun, hostile little environment. And, looking at the first two games of the season, and then obviously I won't get ahead to the next one, but a very nice little welcome back start to the schedule. You know what I mean? We kind of ramp into things. And then, Jed, as you know, as you'll point out, the next game is the most deadliest game of the season.
Yeah, so, and those first two games, Owen, to your point, we're not playing Penn State. We're not playing Virginia Tech. We're not playing Maryland. We're not playing these power conference schools that in recent years we have. And we are in more transition right now in this offseason than at any point, obviously, since Neil got here in 2019 when Dana left. So when you are in that kind of transition, see, that's what kind of zinged Rich out of the gate last year. And they got off to that 0-3 start because they played some pretty good football teams early. Coastal Carolina was stacked. and they cut Jack State up as Jack State was trying to find itself. It took Jack State some time with that roster turnover and those 60 new kids to stabilize and find their true north and rip off that 8-game win streak. Well, with this schedule, at least you got the FCS up front to work out some of those kinks, see what you got, see what you don't. You've got a little bit of a road test. Like you said, Owen, they're going to be fired up. They want to prove themselves. They know it's the world against them. Ohio University will. So I like the fact that we have to go on the road in week 2. We find a little bit more out about ourselves, and that it's a different kind of challenge, a different kind of test. You're going to have to swell up enough to make the plays, to take care of business in that environment. And Owen, you talked about packed out and the difference being packed out makes. It's a strange segue to go to week 3 into the backyard brawl against Pitt and talk about packed out. But Morgantown will be packed out. We know that. September 13th, 9:13. That's right.
Yes, I know. The famous 9:13 game that we've all heard. So I'm not playing into this nonsense, okay? I live here in Pittsburgh. I've been hearing about it for 18 years. No one has ever said to me 9:13, 9:13. That's just the Pitt dorks who have nothing else since 1980 to talk about, so they hang their hat on it. But go ahead. Not to be critical.
Here's what I'll say. They got Holstein back. Obviously, Cade Bell. There was chatter they were going to lose Cade Bell when they were 7-0. Their new offensive coordinator, their shiny, sparkly offensive coordinator.
Yeah, they were going to lose Eli Holstein too. Remember, when 7-0.
Yeah, that's right. It was a big deal for them at the end of December for him to say, "Hey, I'm staying," because mid-December it looked like he was jumping in the portal. Eli Holstein, but he's back. Cade Bell's back. Narduzzi would have been in complete disarray had he lost one or both of those guys. Now, when you look at the schedule leading up to this game for Pitt, Pitt plays an 8-3 Duquesne team, 8-3 last year. Again, who knows what Duquesne has this year? They play a MAC school in Central Michigan that struggled at 4-8 last year. So this will also be their third game. Now, with Pitt, we know never take anything great for granted when Pitt plays a MAC school. But let's pretend just for a minute that Pitt can knock off Duquesne. Pitt can take care of business against Central Michigan, and we can win our first 2. We talked about this when McAfee was on the show. We'll both be 2-0. I'll live with 9:13 if it takes 9:13 as the narrative to get ESPN Game Day to Morgantown for week 3. Now, what will we be up against? There's not as stiff a competition in week 3 as you might face in midseason, but here are some of the games. I wanted to look at the week 3 schedule and see kind of sort of. It's interesting. If we're 2-0 and Pitt's 2-0, we're not going to be ranked. They're not going to be ranked. It's nothing about that. It's just ESPN loves stories. TV loves stories. Let's say that, right? And they love the fact that Rich's last game here, we all know what happened against we all know who. They will love that storyline. So if that compels them against some of these other games to say, hey, looking ahead, we don't know if we'll have another chance to go to Morgantown. There's kind of a novelty to Morgantown as well. We haven't been there since 2014 when West Virginia played TCU. It's been over a decade. Why not? Backyard brawl, kind of cool. Let's do it. Here are the other games week 3. Georgia at Tennessee could be interesting. Florida at LSU, who knows? Wisconsin at Bama, not really, right? A&M at Notre Dame. That one kind of worries me. But those are the 4 marquee games that I think we'll be competing against if, in fact, we're 2-0, Pitt's 2-0, and ESPN Game Days at all entertaining it. I think that would be great. It'd be great to see Pat there for that game for that reason. And once again, coaching's a cottage industry, right? On some level, there's interconnective tissue just about anywhere you look. And one of the first things I think of is when I think of Rich and Narduzzi, I think of Michigan State. His offense tangled with Narduzzi's defense 3 straight times at Michigan State. Narduzzi's defense got the better of him, but he wasn't kind of built and equipped the way he wanted to be. But so they have some history together. There's some unfinished business there, I think, between Rich and Narduzzi, with Rich being the competitor that he is. But there's a lot to chew on. In any backyard brawl, there's a lot to chew on. But with Rich back in town, wow, does this get ratcheted up even more notches?
Absolutely. And Owen, you can speak to that better than I can.
Yeah, I mean, just leading up, like I said, you can't overlook those two first games. But if we do come into this game with the momentum, and same with Pitt, there's going to be a lot of feels, man. Going to be a lot of feels in that game, and obviously a big chip for Rich. Obviously, Narduzzi is going to want to knock us off. But I'll tell you this much: expect one of the wildest atmospheres you've ever imagined in Morgantown that night, because you're going to have a lot of probably famous alum there. Every one of them guys is going to want to be there. Every one of those guys is going to want to put the jersey on again that night. That's one that's going to get you fired up for the history books.
Yes,
guys. Last backyard brawl in Morgantown, right? The 17-6 victory in 2023, where your boy famously not only completely lost his voice but also got his car towed. Right? Remember all of that from about a year and a half ago. I will never forget. And remember you this, right? This is a WV. Yes, it's the return of the brawl, in only the second brawl in the last 12 years or so. First one in Morgantown since 2011. It had been a long time since the biggest game, since those guys had come to Morgantown for a football game. But it was a WVU program that, let's just say, certainly didn't have the hype and momentum that it has right now, right?
Yes.
I will never forget this. I mean, Owen, the three of us all got together that day. Owen, you were at our tailgate for a while. Jed, you stopped by. I will never forget. That was a 7:00 night game, and just the chaos that was Morgantown. Our whole group, the 12 of us that we have season tickets together, we got into the stadium about 70, 80 minutes before kickoff. Well over an hour before kickoff. We got into the stadium and got to our seats, and that place was 70% full already. Over an hour till kickoff, and the stadium was 70% full, and warm-ups were just beginning. That was, for a WVU team that had a fraction of momentum and belief and enthusiasm around it as this one does now with Rich Rodriguez and this new era. I mean, so you guys are right. In my lifetime, I think 2018 against Oklahoma was a crazy game. 2011 against LSU was a crazy game. Big O, some of those Louisville games that you guys played were nuts. 2003 against Virginia Tech, that Wednesday night game where I was there when I was 13 years old, when I almost got pepper sprayed on the field after the game with my buddy Jordan. I think this one is going to be right there. You guys know I did the math last year. I think I've been to 87 and a half WVU football games at Mountaineer Field. I went to 5 last year, so that puts me I think in my best estimation, honest guess, I've been to 92 and a half WVU home games in my life. This one will, and I hope I'm able to go there due to my work schedule. I hope I'm able to be there, but I'm with you guys. I think this will be one of the best regular season atmosphere. Regular season, that's the only kind of atmosphere that there's ever been at Mountaineer Field, as you just started having home games in the playoff on campus. One of the best atmospheres we've ever had, certainly one of the best atmospheres in the last 10 or 15 years.
And Owen, you and I can say things that if we were playing, if we were coaching, even internally, there are things you don't speak. And you don't talk about going 2-0 and the possibilities of what am I, right? But we're idiot podcasters now. We can say whatever we want. Right, Owen? It's the things that we never used to dream of saying. It was verboten. That's blasphemy to speak that way. What are you talking about? Don't you dare say, but we're just idiot podcasters. We have nothing to do with anything. So we can speak and say whatever we want. That's the fun of it. But you're exactly right. You don't want to take anything for granted. That's the kind of possibility. Here I am, the weirdo that's looking at the other matchups as if ESPN's going to – I just think it will be such a tremendous opportunity as a springboard early in Rich's second run here. If that would happen at that juncture, it would be a great opportunity with Rich's second run. That's why I wanted to be excited about it, but that's why I am excited about that possibility. We'll see. We'll see.
Before we keep going, I'd like to thank our friends at Fortis as well, our buddy Rick Lewis, long-time sponsor of everything we do here on ITG for roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. You got to visit fortis.us.com.
Yeah, so that wraps up the non-league schedule, which, as we've talked about, looks fundamentally different than it has in recent years. West Virginia, only school in the country, 4 straight years, played 11 power conference schools. That's not the case anymore.
6 of the last 7 to open the season. If you
COVID stopped it.
COVID stopped it, and then Neil had the opener against JMU. But if you go back to Dana's last season, right, where we opened against Tennessee and Charlotte.
Virginia Tech, Tennessee.
Virginia Tech. Yes, sorry. So it would be 7 of the last 8 years. Virginia Tech, Tennessee, Then it was JMU and COVID.
Wait, Wes. Go back to 2016.
Maryland,
Missouri.
Pitt. Wow.
Think about that. Yeah. So
it's
we've
been
had
like,
a run.
seven times in the last 9 years we've opened with a Power
beating our
5
heads
opponent.
against the wall. So we are now scheduling more sensibly like the rest of our Big 12 counterparts are. You want one FCS, one power conference school, one G5, and that's the way God intended. Okay. That's when you're trying to stack wins, build a resume, get ready for a season under any circumstances. So that's what you want to do. Now you jump into league play right away on September 20th. We're at Lawrence, Kansas. Now, this is where
feels like every year now we got to play Kansas early in the season. What's going on?
Yeah, and we have played them out there early in the season too. And this is the first time that we get bit by the bye week genie. Okay, this is the bye week genie coming up and biting us in the ankle because Kansas has a bye before we go to Lawrence, but we do not. So we'll be playing a fresh Kansas team. Again, remember, they start a week earlier than us, August 23rd. So they're going to roll through those games and then get a bye the week of the 13th to get ready for us on the 20th. Now, here's what's alarming. They were 2-0 after byes last year. We remember that battle that we had to come from behind last year. We had the weather delay, the crazy game in Morgantown. Now, this Kansas team has lost Jalen Daniels. They'll be breaking in a new quarterback. So if you got him early, that might be one advantage. I don't think the answer is Cole Ballard, who was his backup. He only saw action in 3 games. What's interesting, at least to this point, Kansas hasn't been very active in the quarterback market in the portal. I would expect something to happen come April, them to make some kind of push, or maybe they have some kind of connection and they're waiting something out. I don't know, but they're looking for the heir apparent to Jalen Daniels. Whoever they're going to be breaking in, they'll be breaking in 4 or so games into it with West Virginia. They against Lance Leipold's back. Now, what's interesting is they have a new offensive coordinator. Jeff Grimes is out after 1 year. He's off to Wisconsin. They promoted internally Jim Zabrowski. He was their quarterback's coach. He's been on staff with Leipold for quite some time. This is a football team that was 1-5. We talked with Phil Steele every week last year about all these tight losses, these close losses that Kansas was suffering. Well, then they got it all together and they won 4 of their final 6, and that included 3 wins against top 25 teams. So they got things right by the end of the season. The fact that we're facing them with them coming off a bye, this is an intriguing Kansas team that we just don't know a lot about. They're probably saying the same things about us. We got a new head coach. We got so much roster turnover. So interesting game there. We start Big 12 play on the road in Lawrence. I expect a pretty good environment for that one as well. We return home a week after that. Week 2 in the Big 12, we're going to host the Utah Utes. Interesting situation there. I think a lot of their problems, because they were still a very good defensive football team, as you would expect with Kyle Whittingham, a very good defensive football team last year. But their problems at quarterback caused so many issues for them. They just couldn't overcome them. And it was really a fatal flaw in that football team. Now, Cam Rising, the battle-tested veteran who only played 3 games last year because of the injury, I'm not sure what's going on with him, but as we speak, he's not listed on the Utah roster.
Okay.
Stay tuned. But meanwhile, Isaac Wilson, who played as a true freshman last year, as a freshman, he played 9 games, spelling or in relief of Cam Rising, who was banged up. Now, they did get a transfer. This Brendan Zerbrug kid came in from Oklahoma. Some people are high on him. So see if they get their quarterback situation right. There's always going to be relative stability with Whittingham. But once again, this is a team that's changing no coordinators. They didn't like what they saw. They weren't productive at all. Again, I think a lot of that was the problem at quarterback, and there wasn't a lot of growth there. But they have a new offensive coordinator. It's a former BYU quarterback, Jason Beck. He did some great things at New Mexico at the Lobos. He had some explosive offenses for them. I don't think Utah needs explosive. They just need productive, because last year was just an unmitigated nightmare. The disaster of the Andy Ludwig passed the job off to Mike Bajakian. They couldn't figure out any kind of rhythm offensively. It was just a mess. They only averaged 20 points a game in league play. But they host a game the week before coming out here, so no bias to look at there. But that's an intriguing game here. The Utah Utes' first ever trip to Morgantown. Nothing says the college football world has changed than us hosting a team from Utah, as we did last year with BYU, in a conference game. Now, 2 straight years we host a team from the state of Utah in a conference game. Speaking of which, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this, Friday, Provo, Utah, Lavelle Edwards Stadium. We head to BYU. BYU, of course, was 5-1 at home last year. They were an 11-win team. They were good everywhere they played. Jake Retzlaff, he really came along as the answer at quarterback for them. BYU, right? I mean, he's making money on that. Talk about NIL. But Kalani Sitake has really stabilized things there. It was nice to see them ride that storm through with Kalani Sitake, because I think a lot of schools, a lot of administrations might have been more premature about their decision making and pulled the trigger and jettisoned Sitake and try to find another answer. But I'm glad to see that they recognized what they had in Kalani Sitake, saw it through, stuck with him, and they were rewarded for it. So I think this is a program on very stable footing. Now, what's interesting here, Friday night, normally we don't do this on the road, but I'm guessing, Wes, I was telling you this before we started taping, we may spend 2 nights in Provo. That's just my guess. I could see us staying Thursday night before the game, and then the game ends so late Friday, staying Friday night and leaving Saturday morning. Maybe, maybe not. Never rule it out, because we are on a charter. We'll probably fly out of Pittsburgh because it's a longer flight. I would guess we would. We haven't typically done that, but we may do that. We'll see. But what are your guys' thoughts on that stretch of games, wrapping up with the October 3rd, Friday night at Provo, Utah?
Yeah, I was trying to think. I'm sure it hasn't been that long, but when was the last time we played a Friday? It wasn't that Black Friday game against Oklahoma in 2018, was it? Was that the last time we played a Friday game?
Good question. I'm trying to think if we have since then. That's a good question.
But that's gonna be a tough turnaround, no doubt. I mean, in 6 days out to Utah, night game. It'll be what, an 8:00 start there, which will be elevation, which will be like 10 o'clock. Kind of their internal clock time. Big O, I know. Obviously, I mean you played in Seattle and Oakland, so you had a lot of those kind of cross country turnarounds. And I think, as Jed kind of touched on, and heck, I'll be honest with you guys. Before I started traveling with the Steelers 3 years ago, I used to think this too. You're like, okay, you're on a private flight on a charter. Is it really that big of a deal? Like, it's still, I don't care how nice your plane is and all the amenities that you have and everything and the direct flights and all that. Like, it still wears you down, that type of travel. And to have to do that on a short week, out in an environment like that on Friday night, that's going to be a big test.
Yeah, if they took out like the back 6 rows and put like a piece of artificial turf, and you could have like stretch bands and get you a slight workout on the plane.
couple IVs going in the back to keep everybody hydrated.
What's crazy is man, I would have crazy swelling in my legs after long flights like that. So there's an element there that you got to deal with. Plus it's a weekday. It's a long flight out there. It's it's tough. It's tough, but guess what? These kids are getting paid the big bucks
hard edge
to do it now.
Hard edge, baby.
Edge. You better have a hard edge, right? You better have a hard edge.
And you know what, Jed? I think it at least sets up nicely. Like and these things always ebb and flow with a schedule. You're going to have some breaks, some things that break your way, and some things that are a little bit tougher. It stinks that you're going to have that emotional game at home against Pitt, and then you got to go on the road to Kansas, who's going to be a week rested. Yes. It stinks that you got to go on that short week out to Utah in the elevation, that crowd out in Provo. It's nice, though, how the next one lines up, because, yes, this is your back-to-back away game stretch in the Big 12, but you get at least coming home from Provo, you're going to have 15 days until you're going to have 15 days until you play another game when you have to go back to Orlando to play UCF. So I do like how this part shakes out, because you're going to get the back-to-back road games at some point. You're hoping to get the bye week in there as well. And you did. So I think that's a break for the Mountaineers coming off of that trip to Provo. You get a week off before you have to go back on the road down to Orlando to take on UCF.
And you're cutting that season in half. That's what's nice about the bye.
No doubt.
I mean, honestly, I really like a mid-season bye because things just happen. You know what I mean? It's either have the bye then or have it way at the end. You know what I mean?
Oh, and there's 2.
And then we do have one at the end, too, which is nice.
Yeah, I'm ambivalent about it, because I agree with you. That's about the time of the year that you're going to need one. Now, what's interesting is it's kind of the Big 12 extending an olive branch to West Virginia. because both times when we take our furthest trips next year, we come back with a bye. And they did the same thing to us last year when we went to Tucson. We came back and had a bye before going to Cincinnati. So that's kind of their way of making peace, saying, hey, we get it. These trips are rough. You got to go all the way across the country through a couple of time zones. How about this? We let you recover in the form of a bye week before getting ready for other action when you get back. Now, the reason I'm ambivalent about it is, and we'll get into how these buys break down, but we have 2 bye weeks. One comes at week 6. I'm cool with that. I don't like the fact that the other one comes after week 11 with 1 game left. I wish you could more evenly divide that. But so anyway, speaking of buys, here's what's cool about it. I want to keep an eye on this. Wes, you talked about it. We have the buy before going to UCF on October 18th. Now, different coaches handle buys in different ways, right? Rich, and it's worth talking about this, the most recent sample size would be what he did at Jack State. Certain guys know, what's too much on your legs, what's not enough on your legs. They know how to hit the sweet spot. They know the buttons to poke. When I think back to when I was playing for Rich, we had a bye during the national playoffs my senior year. And I think he handled that pretty appropriately. He recognized we were ready to kill each other by the time it was over. So he toned things down, and he reads his football team. And that translates to more success than not after a bye when you have extra time. So he had 2 buys a year in his 3 years at Jack State. So he had 6 total. He was 6-0 coming off a bye, and his average margin of victory in those 6 games, 27 points. They dog whipped folks coming off those buys. 6, there was a wide array of teams, both home and away, quality teams, inferior teams. 6-0 in 3 years coming off a bye at Jack State. Average margin of victory, 27 points. I could give you the scores. They blew the doors off some folks. So I think that's one of the areas that even early on, Rich had a sense of how to do that, but he's gotten even better at it. And those results that I just talked about speak to that. So by the time we roll in to Orlando on October 18th to face another new coach, another staff that's in the same situation that we are, a former coach coming back home, Scott Frost, the narrative and the story is very similar at UCF as it is at West Virginia. So we're going to head down and visit them on October 18th. This is a UCF team, for what it's worth, with Gus Malzahn last year. It was 3-4 at home. Remember our last trip down there a couple of years ago, we played pretty good football. I was impressed, not necessarily with where that facility was, but where it was going. They got some great plans for it. It has the bones of something pretty cool. The 3 of us talked about that after the trip, and I was explaining it to you. I could see that turning into something pretty neat once they spend the money that they're going to invest in that, not just the stadium, but the surrounding facility and the village and the shops. So I'll be kind of interested to see where that's at when we get down there. Now, one of the things I always look at, you have your quarterback back. Well, I don't quite know the answer to that. Dylan Risk is back. He started 6 games last year. He started against West Virginia. I don't necessarily know that he's the answer. I don't know if they know if he's the answer. They dipped into the portal and brought Taven Jackson in from Indiana. Taven Jackson played in 7 games for the Hoosiers. He backed up Curtis Rourke. I'm assuming they see some possibilities with Taven Jackson. They at least want some competition in that room, and who knows what they might do in the April window. But again, Malzahn's out, Scott Frost, new staff, so they're going to be breaking things in. We're both going to be hitting our stride about this time. 2 new staffs, a lot of roster turnover on both sides. You'll kind of sort of figure out by that time who has the advantage here, because they don't have a bye the week before. We do, okay? But it's about mid-season. You're working your way into mid-October, heading down the dog days as you stretch out here in a bit to November. See who's making more progress by then. Your depth will start to be tested, those types of things. But this game intrigues me. On October 18th at UCF, let's see what's cooking, what's shaping up there.
Agree completely with the coaches have to know their teams on the buys. Plus, you're dealing with a bunch of college kids, man. You can't just let them go. You know what I mean? Can't just let them go. You got to know, dude. You got to know.
No. I mean, when I help coach my youngest, Mav, his basketball team. It's like up through 5th grade. I mean, what am I, just some idiot that played in junior high and fouled out every game, and I watch some YouTube videos to help my kids' team. I don't know what I'm doing, right? So I help one of the other parents. We piece it together. And I just noticed, even last night at practice, I glanced down the other side of the gym, and we got, 8 kids on the team. Well, we're running drills and setting the offense up, doing this and doing that. Well, we looked away for 45 seconds. Well, two of these kids got a ball and they're clearing the other end of the gym doing their own thing. I mean, that's just the nature of kids. It doesn't change much between fifth grade and college, believe it or not.
It doesn't.
If you let
It
them,
doesn't.
they will take the ball and go to the other end of the gym, do this. You're exactly right, Owen. And you got to know your team. You got to know the buttons to push. You got to know when you're pushing too hard and not pushing enough. And that's why some coaches have more success after downtime than others. You're exactly right. Now, a week after that UCF game, we return to Morgantown. TCU was 4-2 on the road and in neutral sites last year. TCU has Josh Hoover back, one of the premier quarterbacks in the entire Big 12. Head coach Sonny Dykes knows what he's got going on there. He's heading into the period and the growth of this program. Right out of the gates, he fired into the national championship, and it was almost too much to handle too soon, too early, right? But he's kind of stabilized. And I saw a lot of growth in that program under Sonny Dykes last year. I remember we were on the road somewhere, and Tony and Coach Wallace and I were watching the game, and Houston was at TCU. It seems to me it must have been a Friday night game because we were at dinner, I think, watching it. And Houston at the time was struggling mightily. Where I remember they went into TCU and upset them. Okay, that was kind of when Zion Chris for Houston had his coming out party. And I'm thinking it dropped TCU to 3-3. And you're thinking, wow, TCU's about ready to fold, man. Well, they didn't. All they did was rally. They won 6 of their last 7. They finished 9-4. I mean, that's the most under the radar 9-4 in the Big 12, isn't it? I mean, how much love did they get this offseason? Hardly any at all. And the only loss in those final 7 games, they won 6 of their final 7. They got really hot. They only lost by a field goal at Baylor in a rivalry game. And I think Baylor was playing the best football in the entire Big 12, maybe even right there with Arizona State at the end of the year. So this is a TCU team was playing really good football down the stretch. Now, what intrigues me when you look at the placement and the timing of games, one of you mentioned a while ago, it might have been you, Wes. We're coming off the backyard brawl. There's always a risk of a hangover, and then we got to go on the road to Kansas. Yeah. Watch out. Red flag, right? Alert, Will Robinson, right? Well, look what's going on with TCU. TCU has a rivalry game the week before coming to Morgantown against BYU. That's a big rivalry. The Blue Bonnet Battle, the Revivalry, they call it. That's a big rivalry game for those two schools. So will we catch TCU coming in with some kind of a hangover, depending on how that game unfolds against Baylor? Will they be celebrating? Will they be sulking? Will they be limping it? Who knows? But those are the types of things when I'm trying to tear apart schedules and look at what's before, what's after, that intrigue me. And that's how we wrap up October, and now we're going to jump into November on the road back to the scene of the crime from a couple years ago. We're at Houston. Now, Houston, interesting team. Struggled at large, but they were 500 at home last year. They had the number 1 Big 12 defense at home for the entire season. They only gave up 303 yards, 18 points a game. This is a team that played really good defensive football last year. It took them a while to figure out anything offensively, but they were last in the nation in scoring even in home games last year. So quarterback Zion Chris is back. That was a big announcement for them. Played in 11 games for them. They saw flashes, especially in the second half of the season, with what he could do. Willie Fritz knows how to build a program. It's not his first rodeo. But out of the gates, once again, they struggled. 52 points through 5 games. They were shut out twice. It looked like a nightmare. I mean, it was an unmitigated disaster offensively, but they figured things out. Now, didn't figure them out enough, apparently, because they brought in a new offensive coordinator. Slate Nagel, who was at Tulane with Willie Fritz, is his new offensive coordinator. Out's Kevin Barbay. So how they'll look offensively is kind of interesting. We're going to find out long before that November 1st game. And also on the defensive side, now for different reasons. On the defensive side, they had a whole lot of success with Sheil Wood. Sheil Wood was poached by Texas Tech. Now, the replacement, this is interesting, Austin Armstrong, who was formerly the D coordinator at Florida. Things went south there, but he was regarded as kind of an up-and-comer. But new coordinators on both sides of the ball is the larger point I'm trying to make. So it kind of benefits them to be playing this late in the season versus us. They'll have sorted through some of those things by that time. Now, one final thing on that game. The week before they play us, they play at Arizona State. I always look to see there are certain teams that play a physical brand of football, Arizona State, Utah, Kansas State, that might beat you up a little more than the average Joe. And they're at Arizona State on the road in what figures to be a very physical game the week before playing us. So might they be a little sore coming into Houston to host West Virginia for the first time since knocking us off on that with that Hail Mary a couple years ago.
Interesting.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I like that. I like that angle of the physical Arizona State team ahead of time for you. And yeah, again, I know that this was all scheduled, but it does seem it's like weird to see us. We didn't play Houston last year. 2 years ago, we went there. Now we're going there again. But I know that's just how everything shakes out in the Matrix, baby.
I said it when it happened, Wes. It was a lost opportunity for Houston, West Virginia, not to be in Morgantown with Dana year one.
Yeah,
And
made
we
no
even said it.
sense.
We might never have a chance to see Dana come to Morgantown, and we didn't.
Jed, if you would have told us all, like 3 years ago, that Dana won't ever come to Morgantown, but Deion Sanders will, I think we would all said, yeah, okay, all right, good one. Yeah, good one.
And the reason Dana can't come to Morgantown is because he's the OC at Nebraska, and Deion Sanders, by the way, will be facing Rich Rodriguez. Right?
The head coach. Not only are we going to get Scott Frost and Rich Rod back in kind of the double return there, we're also going to have Deion Sanders coming to Morgantown as the head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes.
It still feels weird. Like, I still feel
it does.
Is he how many jobs are left in the NFL? Are there any?
No, it's so funny. I was just having this conversation earlier with Max Starks, former Florida Gator and Pittsburgh
Steeler. This cycle's over.
It's over. I mean, the jobs that you thought Deion could get, I mean, the Dallas Cowboys, obviously, where he used to play and has that relationship with Jerry Jones, they hired Schottenheimer.
Raiders.
And then the Raiders went for Pete. They went for quite literally about as opposite as you could get. And
exactly.
In the old grizzled Pete Carroll. So I don't see Deion going to the NFL at this point.
Yeah, the Raiders decided not to hire Oscar; they hired Felix. That's what they did with the offense there. But
that's exactly right.
So I guess it's going to happen. I mean, it still feels weird to say that. Yeah, I guess it's going to happen. Deion's coming back to Colorado, but the week after we go to Houston, we come back to Morgantown, November 8th. Now, Colorado was 4-3 on the road last year. Shedeur Sanders obviously gone. Expected to be a very high pick in the NFL draft. No one really played behind him. No one even completed a pass behind him last year. So it's not like the heir apparent to Shedeur Sanders was on the roster or in the house. So what they did, they tapped into the portal. They reached out and got Caden Salter, really good football player for Liberty last year. It's a guy that actually Rich and his staff saw at Jack State last year. They faced Caden Salter before. So Deion's back. Even his defensive coordinator, Robert Livingston. Robert Livingston's name was attached to a ton of jobs. I kept thinking the other shoe's going to fall. Robert Livingston's going to the NFL. He's going to go here. He's going to go there. He's still there. Now, this is a football team. Once again, a ton of roster turnover. Far more than you would expect for a coaching staff that's intact. But that's just the nature of how Deion does business. He flips his roster, right? Now, I think it will help him that 6 of their first 9 games are at home, so they can stabilize and find their footing with all this new personnel and breaking in. So by the time they get to West Virginia, they get to Morgantown on November 8th, they'll long have it figured out. Good chance to find themselves after losing whatever they might have lost. So that's an intriguing game. And then, Owen, a week later, on the long jet ride again, we head out to Phoenix to face the defending champion Arizona State Sun Devils. Arizona State, that's a tough chore. It gets tougher because they also have a bye week before hosting us. So this is the one where they really turned the screw on us, okay? I mean, not only are we on the road flying across the country to face Arizona State, but they thought it was a good idea to say, hey, how about we give Arizona State a week off before making West Virginia travel from the other side of the world to come out here. Now, Arizona State last year, they had 2 byes. They were 2-0 after those byes. So Kenny Dillingham's a guy who knows how to make the most of that. Sam Leavitt's back at quarterback. He was a freshman last year, playmaker for him. I'm really high on him. They lost Scatabo. He's going to be off to the NFL. But I like what Dillingham has going. What's interesting here, guys, this is a game of reflection. We look at Arizona State, and I in large measure think it's kind of what we want to be. We want to turn this thing around, and we want to turn it around quickly with a homegrown head coach. Kenny Dillingham is an Arizona State guy through and through. Rich is back home in Morgantown at West Virginia, where he played. We want to be physical. We want to be tough. That's what our brand is. That's what their brand is. We want to be much like Arizona State. I can see us having some true tussles once we get things in order with Arizona State in the years to come. But this might be the first of many of those tests. This is going to be a challenge. Late in the season, when your depth is really going to be tested, are you deep as you want to be? You'll find out in the dog days of November, especially mid-November, November 15th. against Arizona State. How deep are you? How banged up are you? They're going to be fresh. They had a week to heal up and rest up before we get out there. Tough test here, guys. I like this kind of challenge. I'm looking forward to this challenge, and I like that they at least broke up the 2 long trips, the trip to Provo, the trip to Arizona State, the cross country, multiple time zone trips. That's one thing they did in our benefit. But what do you think? November 15th in the desert.
Well, Jed, like you said, it's going to be a tough physical game. So, unfortunately, our bye is late in the season, but this might be one that we really need to get to not necessarily lick our wounds per se, but it's now later in the season. We have played 5 games at this point past our last bye. It's going to be a dogfight. It is a long trip. You know what I mean? If we can focus up and keep that focus and win this game, right? We go in with a bye, we heal up for the last game of the season, and finish this thing as strong as we can. Very plausible schedule here up to this point, in my opinion, as far as, the what ifs could happen.
We're going to wrap things up in the regular season. After that bye, you talked about it, Owen, the second bye comes November 22nd. So we have that bye to recover from the trip to Arizona State, to get right, to heal up, and to rest up, to finish hopefully strong with one final home game against Texas Tech. And boy, do we owe them after what happened in Lubbock last year. We wrapped up the season on the road at Texas Tech last year, and we all know what happened there. Now, Texas Tech, for all their strengths and all the positives and all the buzz, they managed to go 3-3 on the road last year. But one of the bugaboos with Joey McGuire since he took this job, they've struggled on the road. They're a 6-11 football team under Joey McGuire on the road. Remember a couple of years ago when they opened on the road at Wyoming and Wyoming stunned them? They haven't been a great road football team. Now, we both have a bye, so they'll also have the opportunity. They also have that quirky late season bye before they travel to play us. So we'll be facing them at full strength. Now, what's interesting with them, quarterback Baron Morton, ironically, he missed the Liberty Bowl to have surgery after becoming the first Texas Tech quarterback since 2016, Patrick Mahomes, to start every game in the regular season, and then he had to have surgery and miss the bowl game. Check out the future in the quarterback room for them. See what's going on with Baron Morton, but Will Hammond is a stud. We saw him last year. He's played a lot of football. He started the bowl game for them. They're incredibly high on him. So one way or the other, that quarterback room is going to be in solid footing. Now, it's worth mentioning also, this is a Week 12 game, which will benefit them because, yes, their staff might be back, but they have 2 new coordinators. We have an entire staff we're breaking in. Well, they at least have 2 new coordinators they're breaking in. They have a new offensive coordinator. Zach Kentley, their road coordinator the last few years, had a lot of buzz around him. He parlayed that with his job that he did in Lubbock into the head coaching job at Florida Atlantic. So hats off to him. Replaced by Mac Leftwich, who did some really good things at Texas State. Wide open guy, fits right into what you would expect with the offensive pedigree of Texas Tech. So on the offensive side, new coordinator and Mac Leftwich. On the defensive side, we mentioned it earlier. What they did was they reached out and plucked Chia Wood from Houston because Houston was doing some really good things defensively. And when you can flex and you have that oil money, a little more oil money than you might have on the other side of the state, Texas Tech has some oil money and they have some young oil money. Those dudes are in their 40s donating oil money to this program, right? So they go out and get the D coordinator they wanted. And what's interesting to me, guys, this is the first time that we closed the regular season at home since 2018, that Oklahoma game against Kyler Murray that you mentioned against the number 6 ranked Sooners. The last 6 years, we have finished on the road. Now, there's a lot of history, and we'll spend a separate episode at some point talking about this. When you look at West Virginia home games, either the Saturday or let's say weekend of, Thursday into the weekend, whatever, prior to Thanksgiving or the weekend of Thanksgiving, that includes Thursday and Friday games, traditionally, attendance suffers. And I've always heard the same reasons. Students are out of town. It's the first week of gun season. The weather's spotty. You don't know what to expect. So, no, it wasn't last year, the small crowd against UCF because West Virginia was terrible and Neil Brown had to go. No, I've looked at every game since 1980. All right. that West Virginia has played on those 2 weekends. Here are the numbers for you. 34 times since 1980, West Virginia has had a game on one of those 2 weekends. 62% of the time, that game, irrespective of record, is the lowest attended game of the year. 82% of the time, it's either the lowest attended game of the year or the second lowest. I could go through the list. Owen, you guys were 9-1 and had 8,000 empty seats there. I've seen 8-2 teams with 47,000. Even when we're good, the only exceptions that you can list are when we're so good, we're truly playing for a championship and we know it. 93 Miami, the stakes were so high. Ironically, that same weekend that we can't put butts in the seats no matter what we do, no matter what our record is, when we play number 4 Miami, we're unbeaten, largest crowd in the history of the stadium, 70,000 people. The other ones, you have 2 examples. It's for the same reason. 1988 Syracuse, a chance to go unbeaten and go to the national championship, 65,000. All of a sudden, hunting season doesn't matter. Students out of town don't matter. All of a sudden, they turn up. And then finally, the 2018 Kyler Murray game. If we won, we went to Jerry World to go to the Big 12 championship game, largest crowd of the season, that game. But other than that, even when we're pretty good, I mean, guys, we were 7-3 playing a number 8 ranked Pitt team in the backyard brawl.
My freshman year.
And we beat them. Your freshman year.
Tyler Bittencourt, shout out.
In front of the smallest crowd of the season. Again, we were 7-3. Pitt was 8th in the country. Smallest crowd of the season. Those factors matter. So we're going to have to find a way to overcome that because we should have much more of a home field advantage, not just through part of the season or 2/3 of it, but we need to find a way to make those that last weekend or two when it does fall. Some years we don't have a game those weekends, and that's fine. That's why it's only happened 34 times since 1980. One year it happened twice. We had a game the weekend before and the weekend after, and both crowds were terrible, right? But I mentioned this to you, Wes. We're going to spend an episode discussing ideas to help figure out a way to solve this problem, to understand, like right now, here we are in February, and I can tell you right now, no matter what our record is, unless we're undefeated and get ready to go to the national championship, that's it. If we lose a game, and you guys were 9-1, and there were a bunch of empty seats. Okay, so if we lose a game, we're not going to have the same home field advantage for that weekend that we do for the rest, and I want to have the same home field advantage. What do we do to enhance that opportunity that has been a problem since this facility opened in 1980? We need to find a way to get some. I don't know if we give a truck away. I don't know what we do. Hold a concert. We can come up with some ideas, but we need a lively crowd every time we have a game, including the week of Thanksgiving with the students out of town or hunting season going on.
Well, 2 things on that. One, students are going to be students. Like, I fought this battle when I was in school. We were great when I was in the Geno Smith, Tavon Austin years. We were ranked. We were good every year when I was in school. The Oklahoma Tavon Austin 5 billion yards game. I mean, there's no students there. And like, part of me, I get it, okay? Because 99.9% of these students, they didn't grow up, their parents didn't give them the initials WVU, and they didn't grow up going to WVU games and being a psycho like I was. I get it. A lot of these kids live far away, and it's like I haven't been home and seen my friends and family since August, and it's Thanksgiving, and as soon as I get done with my last class, I'm out of here. Like, I get that. I do, but I also would argue with people all the time, like, okay, say you get 6 home games a year, you're a student for 4 years. That means you get 24 WVU home games in your 4 years of college. A handful of those are going to be against teams like Robert Morris and Towson and games like that, hashtag with all due respect to those programs, you're not exactly getting jacked up and Duquesne comes to town, right? It's not a massive, huge ordeal. So you really probably only get 20 games in your college career that really matter. Like, why are you going home? Why are you skipping out on one of those every single year? But again,
what's the funniest part about
just have different
these
priorities.
Games that I'm talking about, the games you just mentioned, James Madison, Duquesne, Western, whoever. Those games have more attendance than the games we're talking about.
Well, it's nice. It's nice weather. It's nice weather at the beginning. The students will always show up for nice weather at the beginning of the year.
Okay, I'll say this: Owen was 8-1 against Pitt in the backyard brawl, and there were 7,000 empty seats. He was 9-1 against South Florida, and there were 7,000 empty seats.
I was at both those games.
Why is it that when you're 10-0, okay, all of a sudden Those reasons don't matter. The 7,000 empty seats don't exist. You're sold out.
Well,
so it can happen. You see what I'm saying?
That was
going
to be
make sense
my
to me that Duquesne.
Yeah.
Duquesne has more people at it than some of these games we're talking about. It's the backyard brawl.
No, again, on the surface, you're absolutely right. But when you're talking, again, not people like us that live and breathe and sleep and eat football, and this stuff probably matters to us way more than it should. Most people aren't. Most people aren't like that. They would rather go home and see their family that they haven't seen in a few months. They would rather go to deer camp and hang out with their friends and family that they haven't had that experience in a year. And again, I'm not saying I agree with that. You got plenty of time to hunt. You got plenty of time to get together with your family.
Everything you just said's true.
Go to the friggin' game. There's 6 of them a year.
Everything you just said's true. They'd rather do those things unless we're playing for a championship.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden they'd only like to be at the championship.
Sure.
You know, all those things you just said don't matter all of a sudden.
No, you're absolutely right. But all those other so you guys know this too, and I'll close with this because this has been a long episode and we do need to shut this down. But you guys know my first job out of college, I worked for a hockey team in Ohio. And we were the same. We had 30 home games, 60 game regular season, 30 home games a year. We had 5 or 6 home games a year that were easy. Our stadium held like 7,000 people. Easy sellouts, no problem. But the other 20 games a year, we had 1,000, 2,000 people there. And it did not matter how many bleeping ideas and promotions that we came up with. You know, the one way we got people in the stands was when we were competing for a championship. Ohio high school football didn't matter. The holidays didn't matter. All this springtime stuff that we talk about didn't matter. So you're right. It doesn't guarantee you. It doesn't. No, you're right.
It was 8-1 against Pitt.
Jed, hold on. Don't let me finish. Let me finish. It's not a guarantee, but you also told us the 3 exceptions to the rule, and those 3 exceptions to the rule were 3 of the best teams in WVU football history. So there's no way to guarantee it, but the best way to put yourself into position is be playing meaningful football. And you said and they had 8,000 empty seats for that one backyard brawl.
And that the UCF game.
That shouldn't be the case, but there's also a big difference between 8,000 empty seats and 18,000 empty seats.
Which is usually the case.
So
in other words, there is
a middle ground there.
If you're only 6-4, that's when you get 18,000 empty seats.
Correct.
That's what I've noticed in charting these games.
Correct.
Wes, the first time Oklahoma, one of the greatest brands in the sport, the first time they came to Mountaineer Field, there were 10,000 empty seats.
I was a student. I know. I was there. I remember all these examples except for like the 80s ones. I don't remember those, but that was before my time.
Wes, it started when the stadium opened in 1980, the lowest attended game, and let's go to 1982. We were 8-2, and the lowest attended game was that weekend. There were only 48,000 people. Every other game, 55,000, 57,000, 58,000. We were 8-2. We were a good football team playing for big stakes.
Jed, I am. You are preaching. Forget the choir. You are preaching to the Pope right now. Okay, I am. But people, not me, but people don't love WVU football more than they love their family in the holidays, more than they love their hunting, and more than they don't want to sit in crappy weather unless it's a really good team.
And
so
then all of a sudden
we can give away all the cars that we want. We can have all the Charles Wesley Godwin concerts that we want. The only thing that's not even going to guarantee it, but at least help it, is to win some bleeping games. That's just the reality.
More than 8-1 and 9-1.
No, I know. Yes. But again, Jed, though, there's a big difference between 52,000 and 42,000. You know, so there is some middle ground there.
Here's where I disagree with you. I don't think you can just sit there and say, well, it's going to be 42,000 and that's that because we're 6-4. I do think there's something you can do to eat into some of that number. Maybe. Now, you just got to come up with what it might be a string of things you do. I don't know if you say, hey, if we win the football game, every point you win by, we're giving away season tickets at the end of the game. I don't know what you do. But you can't just sit there and say, well, it is what it is. This weekend's always suck with our attendance. And if we lose one game, we're not going to sell out. But we have to be playing for a national championship to sell out. But if you lose one game, sorry, Owen, 8,000 empty seats. 9-1's not good enough. 8,000 empty seats.
Well, there's a difference now, though, too. Hey, you're playing. Obviously, we're playing for a Big 12 championship and obviously the Natty, but we're really playing for that 12 spot. One of those 12 spots. So that I'm not saying that gives you a lot more leeway, but to your point, Jed, obviously, people want to see a winning brand. They're willing to make some sacrifices for that. So what do? We win some damn games, hard edge.
You got to, again, I'll go back to what I said. Win more than 9-1 because that's not enough. So make history or you're not selling out.
And maybe that's just the reality. Maybe sometimes we like to talk the talk more than walk the walk as a fan base, and that's just something that we gotta look in the mirror and be honest about.
I don't know if that's the case. The challenge is obvious. You have a pool that you're used to drawing from with the student body that's not in town. That's obviously a major challenge. It's a major challenge. Even if you play everything perfectly, even if you're 9-1 and almost perfect on the field, it's still a challenge because the pool you're drawing from. And then let's just face it. We all grew up doing it, right? You go to deer camp. That's a rite of passage. It's part of what you do. And some people are just wired that way, and it's going to take almost. I'll promise you, there's a ton of people that even given the opportunity in those 3 games we talked about, they're not going to take the game over deer camp. That happens once a year. I get that. So what I'm saying is, what can you do to mitigate that damage instead of just sitting back and saying it is what it is? We're not even going to try anything. What can you do to at least cut into it? Can you turn 42 into 47 with the same record? What is
Executive order to make deer camp illegal. There we go. Boom. Problem solved. Problem solved.
Run for office on that 2 for 1.
Problem solved. I'm not going to win West Virginia, but you know what? I'll get more butts in the seats whenever I'm elected in 2028. More butts in the seats, except for this executive order will not apply to Western Pennsylvania. You guys just go hunt. No one gives a rip about Pitt football anyways.
I mean, let's face it, Wes. There's a reason minor league baseball programs do what they do because it's all relative. Instead of getting 700 people there, when they have promotions, they get 1,100 people.
I lived and worked in that world, and so those things, absolutely. Military appreciation night, 80s night, all these things matter 1,000%, but nothing matters more than winning games.
Red Panda matters.
Red Panda matters. You're exactly right, but nothing matters more than winning games. But the reality of that is,
of course it doesn't. Let's take that off the table. The most
obvious
part of this
winning
conversation
games
is that.
Doesn't guarantee.
Take that off the table.
Yeah,
you either make history or you're not selling out. That's off the table. 9-1 is not good enough. We know winning is the only way to fix this. 9-1 better be 10-0. Or you're not selling out. You're going to have 7,000 empty seats. We get that. That's the most obvious part of this conversation. What I'm saying is, instead of just settling in saying that weekend we're going to settle for 44,000 people no matter what, we're not 9-1, we're not 10-0, so it's just 44,000. I'm saying that's not good enough. You're not going to go from 44,000 to 58 or 60, but how can you go from 44 to 50 and find a way to consistently do that? You can't change your record. And we realize the record only carries you so far as history's shown us.
Jed,
so
it's
what
easy.
do you do?
2 for 1 on beers, bud.
That might help.
Buy one trust lager, get one free.
Yeah, buy one, get one, dude. I mean, I'm telling you that, and maybe even throw in a pepperoni roll.
You know what we need to do? We need to ask the people listening, what ideas might you have?
Let's tell our listeners, hey, let's get what do we need? 10,000 tickets?
Well, let's wait and see when we get there.
That one game, okay? Hey, look, we're gonna buy 10,000 tickets. And we'll give them to our subscribers. Okay, so we will make the difference up. We will make the difference up.
And if you get those tickets from us and you still go to deer camp, you're dead to us. How about that?
You're dead. You're dead to me.
No, I watch the deer camp stuff, man. I grew up in deer camp. And I'm around people in deer camp.
You guys know my whole family is from Doddridge County. You don't think deer camp's a big deal, but that's what I'm saying is, to me, West Virginia. Listen, some people might think this is pathetic, and we have really gone down a rabbit hole here. But like, aside from my family, my friends, my health, and my finances, I don't think there's anything that I care about more than WVU athletics and WVU football in particular.
Yeah.
People are allowed to have their priorities. You can love WVU football, but you can love deer camp more. I'm being kind of goofy. I don't want to make it seem like I'm judging people, but I think that's just reality. Like, I think we are a great, dedicated fan base, but I think everybody has priorities that they still care about more than WVU football, even when we're 9-1. And that's just the reality. There's things you can do to change. There's things you can do to help that.
See, but not when we're 10-0. Yeah, see, that's the difference.
No,
that's
again,
hilarious to me.
But I'm telling you, Jet, when I worked the minor league hockey for 2 years, we spent hours, days, every offseason banging our head on the table trying to find these exact answers. There's things you can do to help, but the real answer is the fan base cares.
And that's all I'm saying.
The fan base cares how much they care. You know, winning helps. We've all established that winning helps. Yes. Losing hurts. Don't
pretend going from 45 to 60 was some gadget promotion. Not going to happen. I'm saying, what can you do to go from 45 to 50, much like their minor leagues do on their level? What can you do?
Well, I think Owen's right on. Minor league,
I'm tired of saying it. Winning matters more than anything, and it always will.
Our best nights were $1 beer, $1 hot dog.
Yeah,
nights,
dude. I mean, you lower the beer price, and people listen. If you lower it, they will come. Okay. If you lower.
What about this? What about this? What's the big bow company? It's Marshall, right? Is that right? Am I right, Big O? Big bow company. Matthews, not Marshall. Matthews.
Okay.
Last game of the season, we'll give away some Matthews bow and arrows. How about that?
You made us feel like Zuckerberg on Joe Rogan.
I clearly have no idea. I am the least qualified family from Doddridge County guy to speak about hunting with a bow and arrow. I apologize, but I am I don't know. Maybe a little more glass half empty.
Maybe do a gun raffle.
Gun raffle. There we go.
A good gun raffle.
Now we're talking.
What ideas you got? Okay, let's say you got. We want to hear from the fans, the listeners.
Yeah, put them in the comments, and we'll revisit this on. That's what we need to do. Drum up some comments, and then we'll revisit some of these ideas.
So what could what could Owen and Pat and Steve and Rich, when they were 9-1 and there were 7,000 empty seats for the South Florida game? Again, you're drawn from fewer students, fewer people. They're all busy with other things. What could they have done to gone from 53,000 to 57,000? What could they have done other than go 9-1? Because 9-1 wasn't good enough to get to 60. What could they have done to eat away at some of those 7,000 empty seats? I don't even know how many you can. I'm just curious what might be the answer beyond the 9-1 record, because that's not enough. People do have other priorities unless you're 10-0. And then those priorities all go to the wayside because you always set records when you're playing for a championship. And then the only priority they have is to be at that championship. So let us know what you think. We want to hear some ideas.
Big O, I'll tell you this. If Jed solves this problem, he deserves a statue outside of Mountaineer Field right next to Milan Pushkar, baby.
Well, you got to define solve. What's solve even look like?
No doubt. Yeah. A final thank you to our friends at Johnston Equipment. This has been a fun episode. At Johnston Equipment, you can get 0% financing for 72 months plus a free loader on select Coyote models in stock. You got to visit Johnston Equipment on Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan. Maybe that's the answer. Couple Coyotes, couple free loaders for everybody if they attend the final game of the season.
That'd get people's attention.
It might get
people's attention.
That'd be a heck of an investment. That'd be a heck of a return on your investment there. I tell you that much. But yes, let us know in the comments your thoughts on Jed's proposal, and we will revisit this in an upcoming episode of ITG. That'll be a lot of fun.
I just don't like the idea of doing nothing. That's all. I don't want her to sit here and settle with 45,000 people for a 7-3 team or whatever.
I like your attitude.
Can you do something?
I like your attitude.
You know?
Jed, I'm defeated on the issue. I've already punted many possessions ago. You are still going for the win, and I do appreciate that. I do. I want
a home field advantage every game we have in Morgantown. That's what I want.
Well, for that, all you need is Big O and I there, because when the beer truck and Wes are in the building at the same time, the Mountaineers have never lost. That'll do it for this episode of ITG. Thanks, everybody. It's been a lot of fun. We've had some real momentum going here the last couple months with everything going on. We'll be looking to continue that throughout the off season. Yeah. Make sure you're subscribing on YouTube, following us on Twitter at In the Gun Podcast for all the latest moving and shaking. And of course, the one thing that we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. For our producer, Skylar Callahan, the beer truck Big O, the signal caller, Jed Drenning, I'm Wes Euler. Thanks for listening. Thanks for participating. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon. You've been In the Gun.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.